Here we go. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chris Marquez, Senior Vice President of Sales for Granite Escrow and Settlement Services. I want to welcome you to the first in a series of webinars that we will be bringing you that aims to provide you with current and relevant information as we aim to be a trusted resource to you through this unprecedented time. Ultimately, it's our goal to help you and be here for you as we start our journey towards a new normal and get back to business. In light of the current crisis, our team at Granite Escrow hopes that you and your loved ones are healthy and safe. We look forward to prosperous times ahead. Yeah, as our company was founded in 2009 during financial peril, we're not strangers to uncertainty, and in these times we understand that it takes a village to navigate through these difficult times to get business done. I'll tell you, 11 years later, I'm proud to be a part of this organization, which has emerged as a leader and as a proven record of innovation and creating new standards of care that protect our clients to the highest level. The proof of that is that you guys as a community, as a real estate community, entrust us with over $4 billion a year in transactions across our 8 locations in Southern California. This conversation, this discussion includes folks from all over Southern California, from LA all the way down into San Diego. And we appreciate your time that you've dedicated to this webinar, as we see you're going to get a lot of good takeaways from the information that we're about to provide you. Before we start, I'd like you to note that we are recording this webinar. We are broadcasting on Facebook Live, and we will be sharing a copy on YouTube in the coming days. During this webinar, we invite you to submit questions to our speakers through the Q&A tab. We will address a handful of questions at the end of this discussion. Any unanswered questions will be forwarded to our appropriate speaker and will be directly responded to. With that, I'd love to, at this point, introduce our esteemed panel of speakers. First off, we have Brad Cohen, CEO and President of Granite Escrow. Brad is a 30-year veteran in the escrow industry and the founder of Granite. He was an executive with the Heritage Escrow Company, which at the time was the leading independent escrow company in California. He left in early 2009 to start a new escrow company with the vision of creating a new standard of excellence in the escrow industry. Brad's perspective expands way beyond day-to-day escrow practices and has positioned Granite to be the premier escrow company by marrying great escrow officers with a state-of-the-art platform that's backed by an amazing corporate team. Our second panelist is Barry Sender. He's the COO, CCO, and CISO of Granite Escrow. Barry, we consider the Swiss Army knife of our C-suite. Barry excels at change management, and for those of you that know escrow, you'll know that change may as well be a 4-letter word in the escrow business, and Barry has done a phenomenal job at spearheading Granite's movement to become a top-tier technology and compliance firm, which has helped us to achieve a SOC 1, 2, and most recently a SOC 3 accreditation. Barry's also a member of InfraGard, which is a partnership that the FBI has established with the private sector, which was created to protect our country's critical infrastructure. Our third speaker is Nathan Finney. He's the president of BrightBear Technology Solutions. Nathan co-founded BrightBear in 2009. Good timing there, Nathan. has been an integral part of Granite's technology evolution. BrightBear has earned its position on the MSP 500 list of top technology providers in North America. BrightBear has also achieved the prestigious SOC 2 accreditation. Nathan's creative solutions have helped his clients across a broad spectrum of industries. And I'll tell you that his contributions have paid dividends to our company as we headed into the COVID-19 crisis. Now, to give you an outline of how we're going to structure today's conversation, we're going to go into 3 parts. And the topic obviously being protecting your real estate and escrow business from cyber attacks and financial disaster. Part 1 is going to be understanding how to vet and qualify an escrow company. Brad's going to take that segment. Part 2 is understanding cyber attacks, the threats, and where ultimately we see them going, and just the uptick in cyber alerts during COVID-19. And the third segment will be practical tips and understanding of how you can protect your information technology, as many of you are now working remotely, and we will continue to for the foreseeable future. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Brad for the first segment. Thanks for joining us, Brad.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thanks, Barry. And Nathan, critical part of our company. As Chris stated, I started this company back in 2009, March, in fact. And people thought I was lost my mind starting an escrow company when the world was falling apart. When I hired our first escrow officers, I wanted to create a safe environment where they didn't have to worry about being laid off and worrying about where they're going to have a paycheck, but merely to provide them with an environment where they could provide the best service to the clients in a very changing environment and offer the highest level of security and, most importantly, integrity to those we deal with. We've come a long way since then, and I'm very proud of the team we have, over 80 employees. I don't want to get into an infomercial on Granite, but in a way I have to speak a little bit about what we do, because it gives you an insight as to what the standard really should be in the world we're dealing with you as agents, lenders, etc., who are entrusting your client's biggest asset with a company that has to take care of it, not only their privacy, but most importantly, their funds too. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we've been in a cyber war for a number of years. Eastern Europe, Russia, North Korea. People think it's not real. You know, oh, somebody just got in and hacked me. Somebody put something suspicious on my Facebook account, and it's not something to really worry about. But as Barry and Nathan will get more into specifics, the cyber war is real. As a result, we decided to do something unprecedented in the industry. We decided to go and get our SSAE 18, SOC 1, SOC 2, and now SOC 3 attestation. And basically what that is an audit done by CPAs to make sure that we run at the highest level of not only security, privacy, integrity, and security. And we're very proud that we've had this now for 5 years in a row. Barry was integral in making sure we got through these audits, and these are not easy to do. A lot of times we'll tell people we have our SOC attestation, and they ask, is it a red SOC or a blue SOC? The reality is it proves to our clients and to your clients that we have everything at the very highest level. We are stewards of your client's biggest investment. The last 2 years in a row, we've handled over $4.4 billion through our trust accounts. I want to share with you briefly, most of you know there's 3 different avenues of escrow. There's title company escrows. They run a very secure environment too, but their focus is title, not escrow. Then there's the independent escrows like us. And then of course there's the DRE licensed escrow companies. I want to give you a very frightening statistic. Last year, out of, and I'm reading these stats here, out of 130,000 licensed DRE real estate companies, there were only 50 audits. Of those 50 audits, 46% or 23 of those companies had a shortfall, adding up to $1.8 million. Can you imagine if they had audited all 130,000, what that figure would be? Under the DBO, the Department of Business Oversight, that regulates us, they audit 25% every year of the licensees, plus we're required to go through an annual CPA audit. If there are any losses, we are required within 24 hours to put those funds back into escrow. And if there's a loss in an industry-wide, in our industry under the DBO, all the other independent escrow companies have to chip in. So there's an extra level of security there. What is wire fraud? We hear this, and I'm going to give you what the definition is. It's defined as a financial crime that involves the use of telecommunication and information technologies. Wire fraud has plagued the real estate and escrow industry, making them the 3rd most targeted industry. That is frightening. Obviously, we know why, because of the dollars that are involved in real estate. So there's the man in the middle, and this is where you as real estate agents become a part of it. You are the target because you are the man in the middle, the lady in the middle between your client and escrow. And as we've seen over the last few years, the biggest culprits, or targets I should say, have been the buyers with their earnest money deposits, because agents have been hacked. Agents have malware. The bad guys sit and they wait. They're very patient. And they see, wait, and then they prance on the opportunity. So basically what was happening is agents would then send an email to the escrow officer saying, congratulations, I'm sending you an escrow. Here's my buyer's name, contact them, let's get everything going. And the escrow company, by the time they had tried to reach the buyer, the bad guys have already replicated the escrow company's email, their website, their everything else, and send the wiring instructions to the buyer. The earnest money deposit gets sent elsewhere, and the poor consumer is ripped off. So what we did as a company was we took a little proactive stance. We said, and we're one of the very first to say to the agents, don't email us, call us. Our escrow officers then call your client. We tell them a little bit about the crime and the risk they're at, and we let them know that we're going to send our wiring instructions via DocuSign with double authentication. What does that mean? They will get a code on their cell phone, and that code needs to then be entered to open up their DocuSign. It's proven to be very successful, and it's an extra layer of protection. So we as a company have done a number of things that have been critical. Nathan's played a huge role in this. We decided a number of years ago to take our data and store everything at the most secure data center in the country. It's Fort Knox when it comes to data centers. We've actually then taken our software and we house it there. So every escrow officer basically has been remote, which has basically been working from home in essence, even though they're in the office, but it's the same as working from home. They connect to the data center and they do their escrows that way. We've been paperless for a number of years. So we've been ahead of the curve, and these are things that have been critical. We have a separate trust accounting department. What does that mean? It means we have checks and balances. It means when an escrow is ready to close and the funds need to be dispersed to your sellers, it means we have 3 checks. 1, we're making sure the funds are going to the correct party. 2, we're checking the bank accounts. We're making sure there's no money laundering. And 3, most importantly, we've got 1 person inputting and a 2nd person releasing. At some point, we'll talk a little bit about what are the disadvantages if you don't have that. But these are all critical parts that have made us on the cutting edge and why we've handled and been able to handle some of the very largest transactions in the country. There's 3 terms, and I know I'd like Barry to address it, and that is phishing, vishing, and smishing. It's not Yiddish.
That real fast.
It's not Yiddish, but it's what goes on in the world today in cybercrime. So these are a few things we as a company have done to make sure that we are protecting not only ourselves, but most importantly, you and your clients. Because at the end of the day, most escrow are directed by the real estate agent. And if the real estate agent is simply doing it and giving it to the company in-house because there's an incentive, or perhaps they're giving it to their favorite rep because they did a favor for them, or they provided a fruit platter or something at the open house, those are things that can put the consumer at risk and ultimately come back and haunt the real estate agent. So we have a thing in our company called think before you click. And it is critical. There's a culture in our company where we continue to educate our escrow officers, our salespeople, our support staff, because it is very easy, curiosity killed the cat, to click on things we shouldn't. I will say one thing in closing before I hand this over back to Chris. The market is picking up. Last month, despite being completely shut down, our numbers were off about 50%. This month, in the first three business days, we've seen a significant increase in sales going into escrow. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but the bad guys are out there. They are out there more than ever, and it's critical that, one, you make sure you are being responsible and taking care of your client's best interest and protecting yourself and their funds as well. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Brad. One question that I get asked a lot is, say I'm an agent, I'm representing a buyer, and it's a highly competitive situation. Say there's 20 offers on the table, and the listing agent is insistent on all terms in the contract, escrow being one, obviously. If I'm in a position where I really can't negotiate and my clients have to have this house, and we're trying to write as strong an offer as possible, how can I understand? A lot of times these agents are not familiar with these companies that are being written into contracts. What can they do to protect their clients in that situation and help them navigate, safely into escrow? Because as we've talked about, and I think most agents are aware at this point, that monies are most likely to get lost when the buyer is sending to escrow, not escrow sending to the buyer or sending proceeds out. So if the escrow company's in charge of the funds,
well,
they're likely to get.
There's a few things. First, I think it's critical to make sure that the escrow company you're working with is working in a remote environment. I'm shocked and amazed that in 2020 there are still escrow companies, and some fairly large ones, that still have servers sitting in their offices. It only takes one bad employee, not even a theft, but an employee, to take one of those servers and go dump it in the dumpster. They've got a breach and would then have to report that data breach to every one of the clients, which would be you would have to then go and deal with your clients because their data's been breached. The second part is make sure their trust accounting department is a trust accounting department, and that the escrow officer is not handling the wires themselves. We are shocked at how many escrow officers are dealing with day-to-day escrows, attorneys, real estate agents, lenders, title, home warranty, the full picture, buyer, seller, everybody calling them, and somebody comes in and says, I need you to release this wire. The way we work is anything over $30 or $40 million in an outgoing wire, I personally have to do. I can tell you, I hate doing it. A wire release is not fun. You got to check every number. You got to make sure everything's done. You got to do it multiple times. If I'm an escrow officer on a busy desk, the last thing I'm going to do is want to do that. And ultimately, I'm going to make a mistake. And it only takes one mistake for your client's proceeds to go to the wrong place. And the third thing I would do is ask them what they are doing as far as incoming wires and wiring instructions for their clients. If they're not using multi-factor authentication, you have a potential risk on your hands.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it. It's a lot of great information. The next part of our conversation is going to shift over to Barry Sender. Again, Barry was one of the architects of our technology platform, and he's got some significant insight into the dark world of cybercrime. We've asked him to take it easy on the audience and not go too deep into any one rabbit hole. But Barry, it's a pleasure to have you, and it's a pleasure to work with you, and love for you to impart some knowledge to our group.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for the kind words. I'll try not to go too deep. But to begin, in my first interaction as a voting member of the FBI InfoGuard program, I was told that no matter how secure you think your systems and cyber programs are, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you and your company will be hacked. And over the many months since that conversation, I've witnessed some of the worst cyber attacks firsthand, and as a result have been forced to ramp up Granite Escrow cybersecurity to a level that's beyond, as Brad would call it, ridiculous. I do need to clarify, however, that the recommendations Nathan will discuss next are designed around you, the agent, and I do not believe, based on your risk profile, that you will need the level of security that we at Granite have in place, because after all, you're entrusting companies like ours to protect your clients' money and MPI data. So to begin, the typical cyber criminal, I must be clear, is not sitting in a hut in Nigeria. The cyber criminal of today is run by organized crime syndicates, operating at the highest level, and their only job is to steal money and data from whatever they can, and only need to be successful once to wreak havoc. We need to be successful 100% of the time to stop havoc on our systems. In the good old days, before cyber criminals became such a large enterprise, the first step in securing a company system was to move the assets to the secure data center. As Brad had mentioned, we have ours in the most secure data center in the US, and that is fantastic. The next step was to create a network of redundancy. And at Granite, we can survive almost every conceivable situation or disaster, from the internet going down to the equipment catching fire to COVID-19. But despite all those measures taken, the biggest threat that we have lies within and with our biggest and most important asset, our people. Let me explain what I mean by that. Almost all cyber attacks taking place today start in a user's email. Social engineering and phishing are the single biggest threat a company or individual faces today. One click is all it takes and it's game over. Therefore, as Brad had mentioned, if there's one thing you need to take away from the presentation today is that you should always think before you click, and then think again before you click. And let me explain further why I made such a bold statement. Recently, I was looking at the percentage of social engineering incidents between 2013 and 2019. And within that 6-year span, the percentage doubled from 17 to 35%. What was most interesting is that 67% of the data breach victims were smaller companies with fewer than 1,000 employees, with a reported 55,216 incidents. In 2018 alone, that resulted in $2.7 billion in victim losses. Let's fast forward to this year, the year of COVID-19. It's been very challenging for all of us on a lot of fronts, but it has presented a major opportunity for the cyber criminal. With a large majority of workers now working from home, the cyber criminal has an easy opportunity because home setups are usually not as secure as company networks. As example, I will mention a few interesting FBI flash alerts that have been received by myself since the beginning of the COVID pandemic in March. I need to give you a disclaimer that what I'm about to share with you is not classified. The classified data I'm not allowed to share, so everything I'm talking about today is non-classified. But starting on March 4th, which is not a long time ago, cyber criminals targeted organizations who utilize Microsoft Office 365 and Google G Suite to conduct business email compromise scams. That's the scam Brad talked about, and it's the scam where they compromise your email account and result in the misdirect or transfer of funds. This is what happens when an agent is compromised and the buyer's deposits are stolen. Between January of 2014 and October of 2019, the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center received complaints totaling over $2.1 billion in actual losses from these types of scams. Fast forward from March to April of this year, and without any scruples, cyber criminals tried to potentially create disruption to ventilator and personal protection equipment acquisition efforts. On that same day, a series of emails and smishing attempts went out to various persons to attempt to compromise bank account details of account holders at Chase Bank, informing the individual to log into their Chase secure server from their cell phone to accept the stimulus payment. Fast forward to the 21st. The FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center received reports of extortion scams during the current stay-at-home orders due to COVID-19. Because so many people were staying at home and using their computers more than usual, the scammers took the opportunity to find victims and pressure them into sending money. Scammers are sending emails threatening to release sexually explicit photos or personally compromising videos to the individual's contacts if they don't pay. 3 days later, the official number of websites created to take advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic totaled 48,000. And it's 48,000 websites that were set up to appear that they were legitimate. And on that same day, finally, and Nathan can attest, we've had this fight with the internet providers for a long time, the federal authorities managed to get a collaboration between law enforcement and the private sector, including the internet domain providers and registrars, to disrupt hundreds, if not thousands, of these internet domain names used to exploit the COVID-19 pandemic. And then on the 28th of April, Microsoft warned of malware surprise. Lots of people were staying home watching movies, and there were lots of private streaming services and movie piracy sites This resulted in a surge of incoming traffic, and most people like to get free movies. And when they clicked on the free movie to download it, it very nicely inserted malicious VB scripts into zip files, posing as the movie download. So it wasn't really free. Then a few days ago, the ransomware infections that have been spread through the US county and state government networks have now made the FBI nervous that the interconnected election servers have been compromised. Oh boy, didn't we go through this in 2016? And finally, and this one I put in there for Brad, who's a Tesla car lover, a white hacker found old Tesla computers for sale on eBay that still had the owner's data, like their Wi-Fi, email addresses, and passwords. Good one on Tesla. So in closing, let's look at the real estate industry in our world. According to the FBI, the Internet Crime Complaint Center saw a 480% increase in the number of complaints filed last year by the real estate industry. 50% of the real estate industry surveyed admitted that they're not adequately prepared to mitigate a cyber attack. 81% of hacking-related breaches involved stolen or weak passwords. And 51% of data breaches involved organized crime groups. 1 in 14 people were tricked into clicking a malicious link or email. And 66% of malware was installed by opening a malicious email. 43% of all data breaches used social media. 93% of social engineering used phishing. So as you can see from the above examples and threats, attacks are real, and they don't discriminate between the rich and the poor or the large and the small. Doing just the basics in cyber hygiene can make the difference between havoc and losses and success. So again, I would like to remind everyone on the call, if there's one thing to do today, the next email you get, the next time you're on Facebook or LinkedIn, think before you click. With that, I'd like to turn it back to Chris.
Thanks, Barry. A couple follow-up questions for you. As far as losses attributed to real estate and where we fall in the pecking order, where would you say the biggest exposures in, say, from a macro scale, where the biggest exposures are to the average citizen, and where does real estate fall into that pecking order?
You know, I think that we've got to learn to change habits. We're lazy because we don't want to go the mile. And Nathan will talk about what's practical and what is realistic. I think today, whether you are a stay-at-home parent or whether you're running a Fortune 500 company, there's certain basics that have to take place. You can no longer have a password that is unique to 200 different websites you go to. You need to have an individual password and go through the inconvenience of setting it up, because whether you have the right hygiene or not, one of the providers you use is going to get hacked. It's happening every day. So whether it was Target's air conditioners that got all the Target emails out, within minutes, though there are automated bots that these cyber criminals use that run that password and username through thousands of known phishing selling sites, Target, Macy's, Nordstrom's. They just go through, and it takes milliseconds to check. If you use that same password, it's going to get them in. They're going to be able to spend your money. So that's number one. Number two, the fact that it's not going to happen to you, it is going to happen to you. The fact that you look at the mail, you look at the fake news that's out on social media right now, they're watching you, they're putting things out. It's really easy to glean a person's life story. If you happen to watch people posting things, I always joke with my friends when they go away and they put, I'm sitting at the airport and I'm going on my trip to Greece, can't wait to go, it's been a long road. You're telling the cyber criminal, well, good, while I'm gone, let's go knock on the door, no one will be home and we can clear it out. So the takeaways today are, do the basics. The basics will save you a lot. The basics, granted, are very intense because we're managing $300 to $400 million of client funds a day. The basics for real estate agents are, you've got client data. Don't put yourself out there thinking that they're not watching you. They're very patient and they're watching, and waiting for that opportunity to get you to slip up. So if you follow the basics that Nathan will talk about, I think you'll find that they if they can't get in, they move on to the next victim. It's like having the sign on your front lawn that says you have an alarm. When they're picking in that neighborhood, they go, well, that one has an alarm, let's move next door. So it's really the basics. Don't forget the basics.
That's great information, Barry. Thank you very much for sharing your perspective. With that, that's a perfect segue into Nathan and talking about cyber hygiene and just, I think Nathan puts it a great way in terms of you're dealing with the spectrum where you're talking about security versus convenience and everything in between, because everybody's trying to find their happy medium. And as we were starting to become more secure and you saw documents encrypted, I'll tell you, from talking to agents day to day, we heard a lot of complaints from people were trying to upload documents on their phone, and it was very cumbersome and very difficult to get into. So, Nathan, if you can give us a nice scope on, I guess I'm jumping around here a little bit, but really what the average person, especially right now as they're working from home, can do to secure their information, secure their clients, and secure their devices.
Yeah, and that's a question I get asked a lot, and it's a really tough one to answer, because what people want, they want me to tell them that security is a thing you can buy, that if you go to the store and you buy a particular router, you'll be safe. Or if you use a particular endpoint security product or antivirus, it'll block everything. So that's what people want. If I had that to sell, I would be so rich right now. But the truth is, you can't really buy security, because security is knowledge. And really, it's a kind of skepticism that leads to choices that keep us safe. So in IT, in enterprise IT, we use processes and tools to automate that skepticism. A great example of that is something like a spam filter, right? So we don't have to look at every email. We're going to take the ones that are the most egregious, the most obviously bad, and we're going to remove them from the inbox so that you don't even have to choose. There's a number of tools like that are useful when we pursue security, but security itself is not a thing that you can purchase. There's no shop where you can buy security. So I can talk a little about some of the tools that we use and what might correspond to those tools in a home environment, as many of us are working from home now. But I would caution that knowledge with kind of the analogy of a castle. You can have the highest walls and the deepest moat. You can have dragons protecting your castle. But if somebody's lowering the drawbridge, none of that matters. For granted, in your case, you keep your digital assets in a very expensive data center, and they have very scary men with giant automatic rifles who let me into that data center when I need to access your infrastructure. That's not security, because any of those people could let anyone into that data center. Security is something that we achieve through processes, with tools, with automation, but ultimately there's a human factor that's just massive in terms of achieving that outcome. So Chris, do you want me to talk about some of the tools that we use and how those might correspond to things that people can use at home?
Absolutely. Let's talk about, email security, things I've listed out where the vulnerabilities could be in terms of social media and whatnot. But if you can give us a kind of a step-by-step, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I have a couple different links that I wanted to share on the call. I've made them easy to type. So if you type in brightbear.com/20, this is actually a poster that has some of the different things that criminals might use you for, some of the things that they're looking at. And I'm actually going to go back to this. I think it's important when we're talking about cybercrime and digital fraud, what these people are actually trying to do. And an escrow company, I mean, that's a cash cow. If you can get into one of those, these guys are trying to retire just like the rest of us. But usually, most of the electronic fraud, they're looking for a much smaller target. They'll get together a bunch of credentials for compromised computers. They'll get Amazon passwords, and they sell them in chunks on what's called the dark web, which is just encrypted websites, basically. So an Amazon password might go for $3. A compromised computer is about $12 in the US, about 75 cents in Vietnam for a Vietnamese computer. And you can buy these things. You know, if you're a terrible person, you can log onto the dark web and collect these things. They're looking for extortion payments, which means they want to encrypt your data. And they're looking for your contacts so that, you know, if once they're done exploiting you, they can exploit your friends and family as well. And all of that adds up to about $2.9 million per minute. So it's a growth industry, and it's one that we spend a lot of time trying to combat. So that's kind of what we're up against. Again, brightbear.com/20, this will download a poster that kind of talks about some of those attacks and how they work. I get asked this question a lot. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but everybody's using, you know, a home router with a built-in firewall. There's a number of things you can do to make that a safer activity. And if you go to brightbear.com/21, there's an article that someone else has written that will tell you kind of some best practices and what you need to do there. And we'll send this information out after the call as well. One of the most important things that any of us can do as an end user or in your business is to pay attention to the patch management and security updates that Apple and Microsoft put out. So basically, if you receive a notification of an update, Windows update, or an update for your phone or for your Apple computer, and you can't tell what that update is for, there's not some big feature that it presents that you really want to get. If it's not obvious to you what that update is for, it is most likely for security. So what happens is they pay bounties to hackers to tell them when there are problems with the code that could result in electronic theft and cybercrime. So if I find something, you know, some way to break into Windows, and I tell Microsoft, the first thing they're going to do is write me a check. The next thing they're going to do is release one of these security updates. And when they release that update, there's what's called a change log that anybody can read. So if I'm a bad guy and I'm trying to break into Windows, don't you think I'm going to read that change log? And with that information, couldn't I much more effectively attack people's systems? So as soon as that information becomes public, it's kind of a race to get those patches applied. And that's a lot of what it means right now to work in corporate IT security. But those updates are free, and many of them, not all of them, but many of them are there to keep you safe. So you want to apply those, and you want to make sure that your computer is getting those. More information there at the link. And make sure that's updating. It is stalled.
So
go ahead.
One of the questions that we're getting is, you know, what type of password manager would you suggest?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you able to see my screen? Is that coming through?
Yes.
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 Perfect. Okay. Good grief. We're all learning how to do this. There we go. Password management. So brightbear.com/27 is one vendor that I can recommend that's available in the consumer space. This is a link to a company called PassPack. And basically what these password managers do, they will take your passwords and store them encrypted, which means if you recover encrypted information, it has no value. It's all scrambled without that decryption key. So the same technology that makes your credit card number safe when you're shopping on Amazon can be used to secure your passwords. One thing a lot of people don't realize is that if you save passwords in your web browser, those can be pretty easily recovered if someone has access to the computer. So be careful and be judicious what passwords you allow your web browser to save for you. This is a great example of that spectrum between, you know, security and convenience. It's very convenient to have your web browser automatically fill in passwords, but it's not very secure. So we have to make these decisions of, you know, how much we want to pursue security versus convenience, and we all make those decisions every day. You know, it's really convenient to leave your house unlocked, but most of us lock the door. So just like that, you know, in all of these different areas, we have to consider those things. I wanted to also talk a little bit about endpoint security. This has changed a lot in the corporate space. If you go to brightbear.com/23, you can actually get for your home the same endpoint security that we use for our financial services customers in a residential version at an attractive price. This is something that just recently became available. a company that was acquired by BlackBerry that also provides endpoint security to the CIA. I could talk about this for an hour, but basically, instead of looking at a list of bad programs and deciding if you can run something, it's looking at the behavior of that and using artificial intelligence to determine if there's a threat present when you run new software. So definitely, that's a tool that we count on, because sometimes people get tired, maybe late at night. We've had a glass of bourbon and we're scrolling through our email and we click on something we shouldn't. That endpoint security can automate some of those decisions and save us from making a mistake. Another thing people don't think about very much when it comes to security that's absolutely critical for us is backup. Because one of those things we talked about within the threat landscape is encrypting ransomware, which is where bad guys will encrypt your data and then they try to sell you the decryption key. Starting prices for those go at about $1,200. If they know that you work at an escrow company and the data is valuable, it will be much, much more than that. But we don't ever want any of our customers to be in a position where they have to pay a criminal for access to their own data. So we just back up everything. Lots and lots of backup. If you follow the link, brightbear.com/24, this is actually one of our vendors as well, but they sell to the public. $6 a month, you can back up everything on your home computer, and you will never pay a penny of money to criminals who have learned how to use encrypting ransomware. If you take one thing from this call, if you don't have a backup of your data, go out and do that right away. That can absolutely save your business. I heard a question earlier, Chris, you brought up multi-factor authentication. That's really hot right now in the corporate space. Two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication. Basically what this means is we're not just accepting that because someone knows a username and password that they get in. We're asking for another verification to check and make sure that they're authorized. In the corporate space, we typically do this through apps, but the good news is it's 2020 and everybody has a cell phone. And some of the email services that people use are offering this service for free. So if you're a Gmail user or a G Suite user, you can actually do this after the call at no cost. You can sign up for multi-factor authentication. And what's going to happen is they'll send you a text message, which will come to your mobile phone every time you log into Gmail. This is also available for Outlook.com, which is Microsoft's free email service. So you get that code text message to you, and then you're going to punch that in along with your password to be able to access your email, so that if you get phished, if someone somehow is able to obtain your email password, they're not able to log in as you because they don't physically have your phone. So those are some of the tools that we're using in the corporate space and some corresponding tools that are available for people to use at home.
Nathan, I just got a great question posed through our Q&A. Now, I didn't understand the first half of the question, but the question is essentially, should we not use Gmail or Yahoo? And to piggyback on that question, are all public email services like Gmail or iCloud or whatever it may be, are they all created equally?
That's a great question. What I can say is that public email services are frequently targeted and they are frequently used in cybercrime. So just for branding purposes, even outside of the IT scope, if you like using Gmail, you can pay $6 a month and you can use your own domain name. So my level of trust, if I'm working with someone in real estate, I would much rather be sending a message to jansellshomes.com than jan47@gmail.com. It just seems more trustworthy. So I think for that reason alone, it's probably worth the $6. You can still use the same interface. But if you have to use a free email service, the two that I would say are the most secure right now are Gmail, which is free, and Outlook.com, which is Microsoft service, which replaced Hotmail, if you're old enough to remember what that was. So those two are pretty good, pretty secure. I still don't like them, but if you're looking for the answer to what's the best free email service to use those. On the other end of the spectrum and the opposite end of the scale, there is one email provider. It rhymes with Yahoo. They had all of their accounts compromised. Every single username and password became available for sale on the dark web, not once, but multiple times. So if I'm transacting money with someone who's using an email address that rhymes with Yahoo, I'm very, very careful about that relationship. And that is not one that we would want, certainly any of our customers to use. Does that answer your question, Chris?
Absolutely. Well, and just to give you a little background, Nathan, too, a lot of our clients do not like to use their company's email services, and so they are using Gmail or Yahoo, iCloud, whatever it may be that they're accustomed to. And I don't know if you can give a brief answer as to why you would encourage them to actually use the company's email service as opposed to using a public.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a choice between a free email account and one that has an IT department overseeing it, it's obviously not as convenient, but safer to use the one where they've got some processes and some software designed to keep that information safe. There's also a number of tools we use in the corporate space that I don't know if we want to go into here. Tools like mail encryption that are available, mail archive, which is for compliance and discovery purposes. Sometimes I think people use those free accounts because they don't want to deal with all of that. But yeah, it's $6 to set up an email account with a domain name today. And that's something that any IT provider can help with.
Nathan,
That's great. So it'd be like Nathan at nathanfinney.com. Is that the type of account you're talking about?
Yeah, you can absolutely do that. You could, if your first and last name are available, you can register that as a domain name, and it's still very personal, but it doesn't rhyme with Ahoo.
Fair enough. Now when we talk about, everybody's on social media, especially in this business, we're always trying to be in front of our clients and be relevant and present. Now, the vulnerabilities of social media, I saw a friend of mine last night just got hacked on Instagram. So what are the vulnerabilities, because I've heard the analogy, I love your castle analogy, but you're only as strong as your weakest link. And, if your cell phone or your iPad gets hacked, does that now mean that your laptop is in jeopardy, or your personal computer at home?
I mean, certainly you can use the same accounts on multiple devices, and it's the account then that's compromised, not necessarily the device. I think the way that people think about this is really focused on kind of commodities and products to protect us. I think that one of the things that we're learning in the corporate space, in the enterprise IT world, is that human factor is really, really important. So, cultivating that same attitude of skepticism, whether it's email or text messages. One that's been going around lately is, we talked about that kind of entry-level two-factor authentication where they text you a code. What'll happen sometimes is you might get a text message that says, yeah, this is Dave from Microsoft, and we've had some unauthorized attempts to access your account. We're about to send you a code. If you could just text that back to us, we'll make sure everything's okay. And the next message that comes is an automated message from Microsoft with your two-factor code. So if you're not thinking about it, if you're trusting, which is human nature, and you're not skeptical, you might send that code to the attacker, and now they can log in. So, those processes are important. The tools are valuable. But if you don't have an attitude of skepticism when you're transacting, especially with money, you can fall victim to, the latest creativity that's applied by these criminals.
Great info. Now, I heard a great hack the other day when we were chatting about when we're talking about multi-factor, and say, if you answer questions in a process of logging in, one of the common questions is, putting your mother's maiden name. And I think that you had a great suggestion that just to create a faulty maiden name, and
yeah.
So that
you can lie on those security questions. It's kind of fun. It makes it easy to remember. But yeah, the example that we gave is you could tell all of those forums from now on that your mother's maiden name is spaghetti and meatballs. And that information, your actual mother's maiden name, that could be compromised. It could be in a database that's available on the dark web. But if you say that your mother's maiden name is spaghetti, that's both memorable and funny. And it's something that an attacker is not likely to guess. And you can change those answers as well. So just a creative thing that some people have done to try to strengthen the security questions that are used when you forget your password.
This is great information, Nathan. I think we had a couple questions for the panel to answer. Whoever wants to jump in, please feel free. But yeah, in the what I think one example that I think that rings out to everybody that happened recently was that couple in San Diego that lost, I think it was north of $800,000 due to wire fraud. And they were trying to buy the house of their dreams. It's a really sad story. But in the event, and it seems that these attacks are going to continue, and when they do, should somebody be victim to it, what do you do? What's the right response, and is there any way to get the money back?
Barry, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take that one. The first thing that happens when you discover that this man in the middle attack has happened, you need to keep calm. You need to, because a lot of times panic sets in, people start running in all directions. You've got a very limited amount of time. The FBI would tell you you've got 24 hours. Our experience is that you got 4. And so what you really need to do immediately, the first thing is call your bank. The client needs to call the bank and do a wire recall. That's number one. Number two, they need to call the escrow company to contact their bank, and if they've got connections into the FBI, to get the investigation going. They need to put the report with their local police department. Those are the first things that you do. Then, from an agent's perspective, now the blame game is going to start. Who, why, how did this happen? And, so the fact is that Nathan would tell you, we look at these things, they're called vectors, and we try to discern where and how it happened. But at the end of the day, if the FBI and the bank can get the money held, you will ultimately get the money back. But what happens is the money goes into an account, and it's usually swept out within 4 hours to another bank account and then another bank account. So they have to put a freeze. That's the first thing. The biggest problem, and what you need to tell your clients to stop this from happening, is before they wire the money, to pick up the phone to the escrow officer to confirm that they're sending it. So at Granite, we tell all our clients, we bank, our escrow officers say, look, just to be clear, we bank with City National Bank. We've banked with them since 2009. We're not changing the account. If you get anything that doesn't have a City National Bank account on it, it's fraud. But before you send your wire, call us. So what's happening is you're setting the clock, because if we don't see that money within an hour, something's gone wrong. The other thing we tell our clients is, do not have your client send our wiring instructions, which we send to them secure email with 2-factor authentication for them to get it. Now they've got it in their hand. Don't send it to your Merrill Lynch or your Charles Schwab broker to wire, because you're not using secure mail. So there's a little bit of education that needs to happen up front that can save you a lot of hurt. But the main thing is keep calm and get the message out quickly. We're fortunate at Granite. I have a direct link into the cyber unit in Washington in real time. But at the end of the day, if you deal with your bank, deal with your police department, you've got a very small chance of getting it back. But the idea is not to let it happen. So that's where it really starts.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think, if there's an attack that's in progress, we want you to stop the attack. If you see your mouse moving around and somebody's accessing your computer, turn it off, disconnect it from the internet as a first step. Also, if it's an email related thing, if you typed your password into a form, change your password, but then certainly follow those steps that Barry discussed, contacting your bank, your attorney, the FBI. Ultimately, you're also going to want to involve an IT provider in that conversation, because they're going to give you that clean bill of health to know that things have returned to normalcy. But we ideally want to protect people from having to ask those questions as much as we can.
The other thing that's, Chris, can I jump in?
Yeah, of course.
The other thing, it goes back to what we've all been saying, is start at the very beginning. So with most realtors, they used to go into the office and write up the offer and do everything in their office. Now everybody's at home. And, so you're typing up an offer, or you're dealing with a counter offer, and everybody's sending it back and forth. Now the client's information is on there. Sometimes there's extra information that's private. Make sure that you're dealing with encrypted emails. That's critical. And people forget about that. The other thing that people are forgetting about, with everybody working from home remotely, is escrow companies you're working with. Are they printing your documents at home, right? They've got all your documents printed sitting in a stack, and it's got your life information on there. And perhaps they go and pick up their takeout, and they come back and they've been robbed and the paperwork's gone. You're liable. Now, I know these sound far-fetched, but this is reality of the world we live in. So we have a policy that regardless of an escrow officer working from home, there's no documents ever printed at their home locations. They're printed in the office if they need to be printed. And really the only documents we're printing are loan documents. But as you guys know, loan documents are the most secure or the most important documents as far as all your private information. I mean, your whole world, your whole life is in that package. So those are important things to consider as everybody works remotely. Chris, while I've got this, I'd like Nathan just to give a brief explanation and mention that we use and invested in artificial intelligence. So in addition to our firewalls and extra layers of protection that we have in the data center, that the data center has, we invested in a artificial intelligence hardware and software. And Nathan, perhaps you can give just a brief overview of how that has benefited us and ultimately not only the company, the clients too.
We use artificial intelligence in a number of ways to automate those security decisions because we're not able to look at every session that exists on a computer that an escrow officer is using. We use automation in email, to filter those messages. We use it in our endpoint security, which is provided by Cylance. So not just looking at whether a program is on the list of do not run, but looking at what the software is actually trying to do and taking that into consideration as well. There's a number of behaviors that you can observe that correlate with malware that allows us to detect things that might have been designed for your company, which is probably not something that people, residential contacts are up against, but absolutely a cyber criminal might design a piece of malware just to attack Granite Escrow, and we have to be ahead of that as well. I think what you're talking about, though, is what we do in the networking layer. So, just like we use automation to detect nefarious activities in those other layers of the system, we're also looking at the network traffic in real time. So if a computer were to become compromised, someone lowered the drawbridge and let the bad guys in, as soon as that computer starts communicating with the botnet that it's going to join or the attack surface of the criminals, that network activity is monitored and it's flagged, and it's going to send alerts to our help desk, to our SOC in real time. I would get a push notification on my cell phone if you compromised your own computer, Brad. And that's one of the things that we really depend on to be able to be in all of those places at the same time, because there's enough scope going on in the scope of corporate IT that it's not pragmatic to be monitoring everything in real time, but we can achieve that outcome through automation. And that's one of the reasons why I think Granite has been smart to invest in that.
I've had a few texts come through that didn't come through the system, and they've asked, is there an advantage to using a PC versus a Mac from security standpoint for your home usage?
I'm going to plead the fifth on that. I will give you a few data points. I think that there's always a danger in using the most popular product when you talk about security, because it's the biggest target. If you want to steal cars, you learn how to break into Honda Accords because there's a lot of them out there. Doesn't mean the Honda Accord is a bad car. It just means that there's a lot of them on the street, and if you learn how to compromise the lock, you can steal lots of cars. So I think it would be fair to say that my mother uses an Apple computer because I don't want to have to support it. And I think that there are some attractive reasons for that. But in your industry in particular, there may be software that you can't run on an Apple computer. And there are certainly ways that we can keep Windows computers secure. I also would say that Microsoft has the advantage if you want to manage a lot of computers. If you look at companies that have 1,000 employees, almost none of them are running Apple computers, across the board. Maybe in some isolated capacities, you might see them in the marketing department and things of that nature. But if you're trying to manage lots and lots of systems, thousands of machines, any administrator is going to pick Windows because there are tools that are available to manage lots of computers. So it's a long, complicated conversation. I'm not going to give you a firm answer, but I think there are some valid factors to consider in choosing a computer for your home.
And if I may add, Brad, one of the things that one of the things you and I discussed and why it happened um, in our company was we wanted to make sure that 24 hours a day, if an event took place, because escrow officers worked at funny hours to keep up, if something happened, we needed to have an autonomous artificial intelligence running in our system. So from a ransomware perspective, if anything abnormal hits our network, we have an autonomous function in the AI connected to Cambridge in the UK during off hours to automatically suspend operations, to stop the attack, to give time for Nathan to get, or his techs to get the alert and then decide what to do. So we don't even wait anymore to make a decision because people have problems going on their computers all the time. The answer of Apple is, I would say, don't use Apple for true business functions. You just make your life more difficult. It's much easier to secure a Microsoft computer than it is an Apple computer because all the programs you use are geared to that. And the final thing I want to say, and Nathan didn't cover it a lot, is we as individuals today, we do business from all over. We can drive our car and use our hotspot on our phone or use the free internet that Cox gives you. If you've got their service, you get all their hotspots. Those are not secure. So you really need to start looking at a VPN service to route all your traffic through. They're not expensive. Some of them are free, but you need to put that through so that you, even when you travel, if you find a cable lying on the floor that looks like a good cable that someone left behind, it might have malware in it. You got to start changing your thinking to how do I secure myself?
I was along to learn too that if you're at an airport and you plug into one of those charging stations, that's one of the highest places to get malware.
Hotel Wi-Fi is another one, especially in China. You know, if you go to China, the FBI said, if you go to China, don't even take your computer and cell phone. If you need to use something, take a Chromebook with that one document on, and when you leave, throw that in the trash because they're going to find a way to get into your computer, whether it's through the hotel when you go to dinner or through their network. So there are bad actors out there.
Criminals are creative, and they did a study about 6 months ago where they dropped USB memory sticks with like a call home program on them, and they just threw them around in the street to see who would pick them up and plug them into their computer. And it was something like 20% of USB sticks that people threw on the ground got plugged into a system that was connected to the internet. And, you know, it's easy to point fingers at that, but at the same time, I mean, who's been to a trade show and taken a free USB stick and plugged it into their computer? There's a reason why we disable those, you know, for our financial services customers.
Chris, as we're wrapping up, I do want to add one more thing. I preach not only to our sales team, but most importantly to our escrow officers too. We live in a world where text and email is so easy and so convenient, and we often hide behind it. I'm guilty too. But when dealing with an escrow officer as a real estate agent, my best advice is pick up the phone as often as you can. The less you can email on highly important private information, the lower the risk. You know, when you're dealing with funds, when you're dealing with incoming wires, when you're dealing with a new client that's going to be opening escrow, any of those things should be done over a telephone. You know, it's an old-fashioned device, but it's proven to be pretty reliable. And my biggest advice to the entire industry is perhaps we all need to go back to basics a little more and pick up a phone and use our verbal skills a little more than we do our written skills.
Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate you joining this call, and everybody that has tuned in. Thank you for your time. I hope you've gotten a lot of great takeaways from the information that we've presented. And there were a few questions that we were unfortunately not able to get to. Thank you for your participation there, and we will be answering your questions. And just to remind you, we will be posting this discussion on our YouTube page, Facebook, and other social media. And if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to your local Granite sales executive, your escrow officers, or to any of us. You can find us all through the Granite website. And we wish you lots of success. We're hopeful and optimistic for a great recovery coming out of this crisis. And we wish you lots of safety and health through this. So with that, I will leave you, and we'll hope to see you again here soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Pleasure talking with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.